Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Can I let you in on a little secret? If there's one thing I've learned in the last 2 decades that I've spent researching, writing, and speaking globally about the science and psychology of friendship, it's this. Friendships are our most valuable and undervalued relationship. And this paradox, this friendship miscalculation, it explains a lot more about our lives than we realize. And if we really want to reap the benefits of friendship, we need to be willing to prioritize our friendships like our lives depend on it, because they do. Welcome to Two Peas on a Pod. I'm Dr. Miriam Kirmayer, a clinical psychologist and friendship expert. And today, we're kicking off season 1 with a little friendship checkup, or maybe I should say a check-in. It's time for some real talk about the realities of adult friendship. Two Peas on a Pod is officially here. This is the podcast where we get to unpack the stories, the science, and the secrets of friendship. I am thrilled to kick things off, and today we're unpacking what I call the friendship paradox, the reality that our friendships are both incredibly valuable and consistently undervalued. Today, we are going to talk about why friendship matters, why it matters so much more than most of us even realize. You'll also hear the 5 ways friendships are so uniquely different from every other relationship in your life. And you'll get an inside look on everything you can expect from this first season of Two Peas on a Pod. That includes who some of our incredible guests will be, the friendship themes and takeaways that we're going to tackle together, and the secret behind how I became a friendship expert. Okay, so here's the thing. The idea that our friendships are important and valuable probably doesn't surprise you all that much. Intuitively, you get that spending time with friends, that having people you can turn to for advice, for a good catch-up, or for some, shall we say, well-calibrated debauchery, that feels good. When you think about your closest friends, there's a good chance that you get that warm, fuzzy feeling. Or maybe it's nostalgia mixed with a twinge of cringe, thinking about some of the amazing moments that you've shared together. On the other hand, I know that sometimes thinking about friendship might actually make you feel a little anxious, lonely, envious, frustrated, or even guilty, especially if what comes to mind are friendships that you've lost or conflicts that are still very much alive. Wherever you are at, and whatever your friendship experiences have been, on some level, you get it. You get that friendships are valuable because they absolutely are. What most of us don't fully realize, though, is just how important friendship really is. Because it turns out your friendships are so closely connected to your well-being, to every aspect of your well-being, your mental health, your physical health, your confidence, your identity, your sense of self, your career success, even the quality of your other relationships. There isn't a single area of your life that your friendships don't impact. And here's the thing, even knowing all of this, most of us are still dramatically underestimating the impact friendships have on our lives. I am too. We all are. And this underestimation, it's important. Because if we truly understood the power of friendship, most of us would approach our relationships very differently. Maybe you'd stop dismissing that quiet feeling that you're craving deeper connection. Maybe you'd finally have that hard conversation with the friend, the one where you're always initiating the plans or feeling like you're putting in all the effort. Maybe you'd even decide to let go of that friendship. You probably know the one that I'm talking about. the friendship that you've been ambivalent about for months, maybe even years. After all, it turns out that ambivalent friendships are more damaging to your health than toxic ones. And I promise you, we will be unpacking that more in a later episode. Or maybe, and this one's important, maybe you'd realize that what you've been calling being busy or feeling off or even feeling unfulfilled, that's actually loneliness showing up in your life. Because here's the thing, loneliness isn't just about being alone. Loneliness is the gap between the connections you want and the connections you actually have. And that's why you can be surrounded by people and feel deeply alone. And, as many of our introverted friends will happily remind us, why you can spend time alone and still feel incredibly connected and fulfilled. And that distinction matters because loneliness itself is consequential. For those of you who like to geek out on research as much as I do, one of the studies that gets cited the most often, and with good reason, is this meta-analysis from Julianne Holt-Lunsat and colleagues, which actually quantified the impact that chronic loneliness has on our health. And thanks to that important work, we now know that loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that's not all. Specifically, we know that chronic loneliness or ongoing relationship conflict, that yes, of course, these increase our feelings of stress, but they also increase our risk of cardiovascular difficulties, cancer, stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety, the list goes on and on. Here's what I want you to know, though. There is another side to this story that often gets lost. It's not all doom and gloom. So if you're listening and you're feeling like you're actually wholeheartedly satisfied with your friendships, there is still room to grow. There's always opportunity to tap into. Because whereas social disconnection and loneliness can take away from our well-being, social connection, strong relationships, taking steps to invest in our friendships, this isn't just protective, it's additive. Strong friendships don't just protect us from distress or disease, they actively add to our lives. They increase resilience, they increase joy, meaning, creativity, confidence, your willingness to take risks and to grow. Good friendships expand us. And that's a big part of why we're here, because on Two Peas on a Pod, we're ready to add to the growing conversation about the additive power of our friendships. And we're talking about everything. We're going to be talking about how to build friendships that feel mutual and deeply supportive, how to navigate the messy middle, whether it's conflict or a difficult conversation or growing distance or that sense of loneliness. And we'll talk about how to end friendships and when to know it's time. And of course, yes, we're going to celebrate and mark and strengthen the friendships that make life meaningful. But more on that in a second, because first, I want to talk specifically about the reason, or should I say relationship, why we are all here. It's time for a little chat about the uniqueness of friendship.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Before we get into the 5 ways friendship is different from our other relationships, I think we should probably define friendship itself. Because honestly, we use the word friend pretty casually these days. So just to be clear, when I'm talking about friendship, we're not talking about social media followers. And I'm also not talking about parasocial friendships. Like, yes, I do think Jennifer Lawrence and I would have a fantastic time together. But unfortunately for me, friendship requires mutual agreement. And that's part of the definition. Real friendship is reciprocal. It's voluntary. It's emotionally meaningful. Friendship is a relationship between two people where both people would say, yes, this is my friend. Even though, fun fact, research actually shows that about 50% of friendships are unreciprocated, meaning both people don't necessarily agree on how close they are or even that they're friends at all. But again, that's a conversation and maybe existential crisis for another episode, I promise. Now, the truth is, All relationships matter and help us meet our deeply human need for connection. But friendship is fundamentally different from our other relationships in 5 really important ways. And understanding these 5 differences helps to explain both why friendships can feel so meaningful and special and life-affirming and even life-changing, and also why friendships can feel so confusing, so fragile, and even surprisingly hard to navigate. So let's get into it. The biggest thing that separates our friendships from our other relationships is that they are voluntary. We choose who our friends are. We choose who we let into our lives, and we continue choosing who gets to stay. And it's that ongoing, reciprocated choice that makes our friendships so powerful. Because unlike family relationships or workplace relationships or many connections of convenience, friendship exists because 2 people both continue deciding, I want you in my life. And that is no small feat, especially in adulthood, where everyone is busy or overwhelmed, exhausted, distracted, busy with caregiving and building careers and trying to remember their various passwords and staying on top of their inbox. Friendship says, even with all of that, I still choose you. And that kind of chosen connection has an enormous impact on our sense of belonging and self-worth. The second thing that makes friendships unique is that there really isn't a clear social script. So from friendship beginnings to endings, there aren't that many agreed upon norms for how we should be in friendship with each other. And sometimes it can feel like we're almost improvising or making it up. Obviously, we are all familiar with the different ways we can have the talk in our romantic relationships, so we recognize that we might need to be direct about our interest in getting to know someone romantically, about our openness to a second date, about our readiness to make our relationship status official. But when we meet someone that we'd like to be friends with, we don't necessarily feel so inclined to be as transparent and to say, hey, I really like talking with you. We should be friends. We should hang out sometime. Even though this is kind of exactly the way that we make friends as kids, right? And by the way, as adults, many people desperately want this kind of clarity, and they absolutely appreciate this kind of radical openness and transparency. When it comes to friendship maintenance, there are also no clear norms or rules for things like how often we should see or speak to each other, or what quality time looks like in our friendships, or how we can mark, or whether we should mark friendship anniversaries or milestones together. And when it comes to breakups, let's talk about this quickly, because we know how we should break up with a romantic partner. Even if it doesn't go perfectly, we know that the vast majority of people want clarity, want closure, in whatever form that takes. And we definitely don't want that to happen on a Post-it note. Many people want and expect the breakup talk, no matter how hard that might be. But when it comes to friendship breakups, we don't always know the best way to navigate those endings. Do we also need to have a breakup talk? Should that happen in person? Is it better to address it outright? Or is a slow friendship fade the most respectful thing to do? The answer is, it depends. And again, believe me, we're going to be talking about that. But for now, what we need to be talking about is how the lack of explicit norms in our friendships actually makes them especially difficult to navigate. By the way, it also, though, creates a special opportunity to define what works for you, what works best for both of you. The third thing that makes friendship unique is platonic intimacy. Let me ask you a question. Who do you turn to when you need advice or support in your life? For most of us, the answer is clear. It's our friends. There are so many things that we share with our friends before we tell anyone else. Sometimes we never tell anyone else. Our fears, our doubts, the weirdly specific spiral we had at 2 a.m., the screenshots, of course, and also our hopes and our dreams and our goals and our secret wins and our very loud successes. Friendship holds a kind of intimacy and closeness that is neither familial nor romantic. It's strictly platonic and deeply special. It's its own category entirely. And the support that friends provide, emotionally, practically, psychologically, this in return is incredibly powerful. It's a huge reason why friendship is so closely tied to our well-being, and also why there's good evidence now that friendships become even more important than our other relationships when it comes to our health as we age. The fourth thing that makes friendship unique is balance. And this is a really interesting one. So come back to me for a second. If you think about many of the relationships that you have in your life, there's often some kind of a hierarchy or power structure involved, whether it's implicit or explicit. Parents and children, bosses and employees, mentors and mentees, teachers and students. And if you take a closer look at your family relationships, maybe it's with your siblings or your cousins, uncles and aunts, all of those relationships can also carry age dynamics, role expectations, birth order, energy. I mean, even twins are so quick to let you know who's older by 4 minutes. But healthy friendships are different. Ideally, friendship exists between equals. And what I mean by that is both people are of equal status, so to speak, when it comes to dictating that relationship. There isn't a hierarchy involved. There's balance. There's harmony. And that balance matters because it creates mutuality. Healthy friendships rely on reciprocity, on shared emotional investment, on mutual influence, on mutual care, not power. Now, of course, friendships won't always feel perfectly equal all the time. Sometimes one person needs more support. Sometimes one person has more capacity to pour into that friendship. That's normal. But the overall relationship should feel balanced, not only by status, but also in value and care. And finally, friendship is unique because it isn't built around exclusivity. Most romantic relationships prioritize one primary bond. That's especially true for people in monogamous relationships. Friendship works a little differently. There are far fewer limits on how many friends we can or should have, other than the limits, of course, of your social battery and inbox. Friendships are often layered, they're overlapping, they're interconnected. We can have casual connections, close friends, and best friends. We can have individual friendships, mutual friends, and friend groups. And when we meet someone new that we see friend potential with, we can somehow make space for that connection to grow. We don't have to say to ourselves, sorry, no can do, I've already got a friend back home. Yes, we might need to check in with ourselves to see how we're investing our energy and effort, but friendship ecosystems always have the potential to expand. And I actually think that's part of what makes friendship so beautiful. Different friends support different parts of who we are. No one person has to be everything. And that flexibility allows friendships to evolve alongside our lives in really meaningful and, yes, complicated ways. Okay, now I want to come back to the friendship paradox I mentioned earlier, because once we understand just how valuable friendship is, we also need to talk about the ways we consistently undervalue it. And honestly, we do this all the time. Think about it for a second. Where do friendships fall on your list of priorities? And I don't mean your mental list or your in an ideal world list, your aspirational list. I mean your real list, your to-do list, your calendar. Because one pattern I see again and again, and I see this in my research, in my therapy practice, and workshops and trainings that I give, and honestly, this pops up in my own life too. It's that friendship is often the first thing we neglect, especially when life gets busy. And it's not because we don't care. And it's not because we're bad friends. It's because somewhere along the way, many of us have absorbed the idea that friendship is optional. We've been conditioned to think of our friendships as a luxury at best, something that we get to invest in, but only once we've checked off all of the other items on our to-do list. When our work is done, when the errands are finished, when your laundry pile is put away, when you've made time for rest, for exercise, to call your parents or your quirky great aunt, to sort through the good old inbox. When we finally become the aspirational, or dare I say even mythical version of ourselves who suddenly has more free time, which respectfully, and you know this, never fully arrives. At least not with the kind of stability that makes it possible to put off our friendships. At the same time, many of us have also internalized the idea that friendship competes with the rest of our lives. We see our friendships as a luxury or a distraction. That spending time with friends takes away from productivity, ambition, family life, romantic relationships, from success, however you define it, instead of understanding that strong friendships actually support and strengthen all of those things. And this mindset isn't just shaping what we believe, it's shaping how we live. In today's episode, I'm introducing this new idea of a friendship paradox. But whether you realize it or not, we are also currently living through what many researchers and cultural commentators have described as a friendship recession. So let's talk about this for a second, because the numbers are pretty staggering. The percentage of adults in the US who report having no close friends at all has quadrupled to 12% since 1990. We're also spending substantially less time talking to and hanging out with our friends than we used to. In some cases, 50% less time on a weekly basis. So those memes about how adult friendships are really just making plans and saying we should get together indefinitely, they make me so mad because on the one hand, wow, they are so relatable. And yet on the other hand, when did we decide that this is okay, that this is just how it is? And listen, I think that getting comfortable with doing solo activities like going to the movies or having dinner alone, that this is a really worthwhile goal. It's even an activity I'll suggest in therapy if someone's struggling, for example, with feeling confident or social anxiety. But the experience of solo dining, it's increased 29% in the past few years alone. We are spending more time alone. And in some cases, the time that we used to spend with friends is now being spent with screens or with other people in our immediate family, our partners, our children. We're losing touch with opportunities to gather with friends, with the practice of connecting, and over time, with the irreplaceable value of friendship itself. Now listen, some of these cultural shifts, they're positive. People are being more intentional about their parenting practices. We're more emotionally engaged in our romantic relationships. We are more thoughtful about our need for rest and alone time, which, again, by the way, is not at odds with our need for connection. But there's also something important going on here. We are systematically deprioritizing friendship, decentering friendship in our lives. And one of the reasons why this matters so much is because culturally, we tend to define relational success very narrowly. We celebrate marriage, the birth of children, romantic milestones, but we rarely celebrate friendship with the same seriousness, with the same thoughtfulness. Not everyone wants to or will be a parent. Not everyone wants to or will find a healthy romantic relationship. And every single one of us still needs connection. And the good news is we can all create fulfilling friendships. Our friendships are not just a nicety. They are a necessity. And so if we want to experience the benefits of friendship, our actions have to start reflecting the value friendship has in our lives. Now, here's the other way we actively devalue our friendships in practice. We think that they should be easy or effortless, and we totally romanticize organic friendship. We think if that friendship is meant to be, it should just happen naturally. And so when friendships require effort, or they involve a certain level of awkwardness or vulnerability, or repair, or even intentionality and effort, we assume something must be wrong with that friendship or with us. The reality is that friendships take work, and being able to sit in that discomfort, that is actually a big part of being able to go out and meet the kind of people that you want to meet and build the closeness that you crave. Not only that, we think our friendships themselves are more resilient or even self-sustaining than they really are. It's not that we take our friends for granted, we take our friendships for granted. We forget that even though these are unique relationships, they're also, at the end of the day, relationships like any other. And that if we want them to thrive, we need to be willing to invest with intention and to actively seek support when things get tough. And this brings me to another huge issue. We are incredibly undersupported when it comes to friendship. And I want to talk about that second piece because it's the one that I've been working to address in my own work. We are so open about how messy and meaningful the challenges of dating can be, of parenting, of long-term partnerships. Yet we are far less open about the challenges, the realities of friendship. We go to our friends when we have a problem in our other relationships, but we aren't always sure where to go or who to turn to when we have questions about our friendships. We seek therapy as individuals, as couples, as families, but rarely, if ever, as friends. There are thousands of books on parenting, on dating, on leadership, but good quality friendship advice is hard to come by. You probably even have your go-to podcasts for dating or relationship advice or for parenting advice, and there are some great ones out there for sure. The truth is, there's entire industries built around supporting our other relationships. But friendships, we kind of feel like we're winging it. And many people genuinely have no idea where to turn or, again, who to go to when something hurts in a friendship. And that lack of an open dialogue and support, it has consequences. And I've seen this. People feel even more alone in their loneliness. And when we don't know what to do or who to turn to, who to open up to, we make decisions that can keep us feeling disconnected. Sometimes it's even a lack of a decision that keeps us feeling stuck. So I've seen people cut and run or quiet quit friendships that were entirely healthy or salvageable. I've seen people stay in painfully one-sided or conflict-ridden friendships for years just because they've known each other since childhood, or resign themselves to the idea that loneliness and that feeling of social unfulfillment, that's simply the unavoidable price of adulthood. But I am here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. And the good news is this conversation, it is changing. We're becoming more curious about friendship. We're becoming more intentional, more open, more willing to acknowledge that friendship itself deserves care, attention, and support too. And honestly, one of the greatest privileges of my career has been getting to contribute to that shift, both in terms of the cultural conversation and in terms of the actions that we take on a daily basis. I still think back to some of my own early media interviews I did when I first started researching friendship or working in friendship therapy, and the combination of curiosity and confusion and even subtle skepticism that came with them. People would question, wait, people actually are going to therapy for friendship? Or you're working as a friendship expert? Yes, because friendship matters. And seeking support for your friendships and platonic relationships isn't strange. It's responsible. That's the part that I really want us all to understand, and I hope you'll take away from our conversation today. Now that we know our friendships shape our well-being, our health, the quality of our work, and the quality of our lives, why wouldn't we invest in learning how to care for them better, in learning how to care for them with more intentionality? That's exactly why I've spent the last 2 decades studying the science and psychology of friendship and creating these spaces where we can have more honest conversations about the realities of adult connection. Now, of course, I'm not doing this work alone. There are incredible researchers and clinicians and writers and creators and podcasters helping to move this conversation forward in really meaningful ways. And I'm so excited that Two Peas on a Pod now gets to be a part of this growing ecosystem and the different ways that I get to connect with you. And what I'm super excited for is that we'll also get to talk to some of these people, my friends, my colleagues doing important work in this space, to hear how their work is impacting your friendships as well. This show exists to help us have the conversations many of us have been craving for a very, very long time. So let's talk about Two Peas on a Pod and what you can expect around here, shall we? First things first, new episodes drop every Thursday. So trust me, you are going to want to follow the show because we have some incredible conversations coming your way. We are unpacking the stories, science, and secrets of friendship. And there's actually 2 kinds of episodes that you'll hear. First, we have our Two Peas episodes. Let me set the scene for you. Thelma and Louise, Gail and Oprah, Buffy and Willow, Wayne and Garth, Will and Grace, Grace and Frankie, Frodo and Samwise Gamgee, and Midge Maisel and Susie. Those are just a few of my favorite iconic friendship duos. And what's so thrilling is that on our Two Peas episodes, you'll get an inside look at the friendship stories of some of your favorite familiar friends, real life best friends. These are our friendship love stories. So every other week, I sit down with 2 friends for a conversation about the friendship that's shaped them, how they met, what's pulled them together, what they've survived together, what they admire about each other, maybe what drives them a little nuts about each other, the everyday friendship rituals that keep them connected, and what they hope for the future of their friendship. These conversations are honestly so much more emotional and funny and insightful than you might imagine. Because yes, we're talking with people you know, people you admire, people whose work is probably already a part of your everyday life or even your conversations and group chats with your own friends. So this first season on Two Peas on a Pod, we're talking to actors, writers, musicians, athletes, documentary filmmakers, scientists, entrepreneurs, TV personalities. And yeah, these episodes, these conversations, they're aspirational. They're meant to be. There's something really meaningful, even valuable, about getting a glimpse into the friendships of the people we admire and learning about the ways that they've worked to maintain those connections. But they're also surprisingly relatable because it turns out their friendships aren't perfect. They're human. And that's a big part of why we're making this show. Not just to celebrate friendship, although we are absolutely doing that too, but to normalize the reality that friendship is meaningful. It's complicated. It's evolving work for all of us. Then we have our office hours episodes, like the one that you're listening to right now. So in between our Two Peas episodes, every other week, I'll invite you into my home office for some time together, for a deeper conversation where we continue to explore connection, friendship, and the relationships that shape who we are and who we're becoming. Sometimes it'll just be the 2 of us. Other times, I'll be joined by some of the leading researchers, therapists, authors, and experts studying relationships and well-being and loneliness and communication. We're even talking to social connection architects and comedians and poets. Just like Two Peas on a Pod, Office Hours is our thoughtful, judgment-free space to unpack what's really going on in our friendships, to have the conversations that we need to have, but for all sorts of reasons tend to avoid. So we're talking about things like why making friends as an adult is so unexpectedly difficult, and how you can actually meet new people. How to break up with a friend and when to know that it's time. What to do when you feel left out or even left behind. Why you absolutely need to be team small talk and team big talk. And rethink gossip all together. And yes, we are having an entire birthday episode. Just trust me on that one, okay? One thing that's really important to me is that this show feels collaborative. After all, Office Hours is our time together. OURS. So throughout the season, we'll also have Q&A episodes sprinkled in where you can send in your friendship questions or situations or the topics that you want us to unpack together. So hear me out and write this down. If there is something that you have been struggling with or wondering about, email me. Reach out at hello@the2peasonapod.com. Reach out on social media, or, and this is really exciting, pick up the phone and call or text me with your friendship story or questions at 615-PODLINE. That's 615-PODLINE. I want to hear from you. And chances are you are not the only P on our pod working through that dilemma. Your friendship questions deserve answers. And conversations about friendship as a whole deserve way more airtime than they get. So reach out. I cannot wait to hear from you. Hi, I'm Dr. Miriam, and this should probably be clarified immediately. No, I do not make my friends call me that. And honestly, if one of my closest friends ever called me Dr. Miriam in casual conversation, I would assume I was either A, in trouble, or B, being roasted. But I am incredibly proud of the work that has brought me here, and I guess that's brought us together here today. So let's get the professional bio out of the way. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I completed my PhD at McGill University here in Montreal, where I'm based. And during that time, I began researching adult friendship and actually developed a measure of friendship competence that researchers are still using today. Since then, I've spent years studying friendship, loneliness, social support, and human connection. I've interviewed thousands of people about their relationships and friendship experiences. I've been so grateful to be able to support people, teams, and organizations and communities through my therapy practice, but also mostly through my speaking and writing and consulting and workshops and courses and trainings. And my work has been featured in academic journals and also in publications like the New York Times, Time, and The Guardian. But the older I get, the more I also realize that asking someone what they do for work, it's actually a pretty terrible way to get to know them or what they're really like in friendship. So here are a few random things about me that you won't find in my bio, but that my friends know all too well. I love improv and I love dancing. And as it turns out, more recently, I actually really love karaoke. I'm also a deep lover of lists. And as much as I champion my heartfelt appreciation for scheduled free time, I will be the very first person to say yes to an impromptu adventure. I also take board games a little too seriously, or if you ask me, just seriously enough. And if you and I are playing a game together, it means that I trust our friendship, and I trust that it can withstand the tension that will inevitably show up when the less than collaborative sides of me decide to show up as well. I'm a firm believer that we would all be much happier if we exchanged more handwritten letters to each other. And I love to travel and to meet new people. And yes, I do talk to strangers on planes, and I am so deeply sorry for that. But I'm also really grateful that my work allows for these kinds of unexpected and meaningful conversations. It is one of my very favorite parts of my job. And I've also reached the age where, as much as I love to travel, I do ask detailed questions about pillow arrangements to the hotel beforehand. All joking aside, though, here's what I want you to know. Friendship has shaped every season of my life. Some of the best moments of my life have happened in friendship and alongside friends, and some of the hardest ones too. Thinking back to my musical theater background in high school, to then graduate school, to navigating fertility struggles and becoming a mother, to ongoing family health challenges and the trials and tribulations and triumphs of unknown career transitions and entrepreneurship. This is why I care so deeply about these conversations from beginning to end, not just professionally, but also personally. Our two-piece episodes begin by asking guests to share their friendship origin story, what brought them together. And so I thought it would be fitting before we wrap up our very first office hour session to tell you a little bit about my own friendship origin story, or maybe more accurately, the story of how I became a friendship expert. Because yes, professionally, I'm a clinical psychologist. And as I said, I've spent years researching the science and psychology of friendship and connection, and I've interviewed thousands of people, and I've worked with organizations, with universities, with hospitals, leadership teams, and communities around the world, helping people build stronger relationships and healthier cultures of connection. But if I'm being completely honest, my real origin story as a friendship expert began much, much earlier. Specifically, when I was in a Spice Girls impersonation band. And no need to rewind that, you heard correctly. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you immediately get how big of a deal this really is. But if you're unfamiliar with the magnitude of 90s girl groups, know this. To us, the significance of this band was basically somewhere between the Beatles and the United Nations. Is that an exaggeration? Maybe. Emotionally, not even close. And much to my profound relief, and maybe your mild disappointment, this was in the era before smartphones. So the only photographic evidence that I have, that I may or may not share, and there's no promises here, is a single photo of our group from a sleepover in grade 4. Yes, this was adorable. But it was also serious stuff because we meant business. This wasn't just a hobby or child's play. It was an entrepreneurial endeavor. We weren't just pop star wannabes. We were a full-fledged startup. And yeah, there'll be a few Spice Girl innuendos here for other fellow fans. I can't resist. We were hired. Yes, we were hired to perform at younger kids' birthday parties. And no, this wasn't an unpaid internship or charity case. We were paid good money, I might add. We called ourselves Call You Later. Why? I don't know. But here's what I do know. It was the 90s. And so naturally, we spelt it Call You L8R because vowels were optional and using numbers as letters conferred a certain level of cool. And let me tell you, our not yet cordless phone was ringing off the hook. We had these fantastic necklaces made with these wooden square beads that had these little phone and flower details on them. And the 8 wasn't just a normal 8, it was the 8 ball from a game of pool. And we wore those necklaces around with such pride. They were a symbol of our hard work, of our creativity, of our entrepreneurial spirit, and our commitment to each other, to the collective, to our group, our friendships. I don't think we fully realized it at the time, but our name, Call You Later, also turned out to be strangely symbolic, incredibly symbolic. When we're younger, our lives are centered around friendship. We are in touch with and attuned to our fundamental need to connect, our desire to belong. When we say to our friends, I'll call you later, it's a promise. Not only that, our friendships are filled with promise, with possibility. Can you remember how important your friendships were to you when you were younger? How important it was for you to prioritize band practice or soccer practice or drama club? You didn't question for a second whether spending time with friends was a worthwhile investment of your time, of your energy. The older we get, though, Call You Later goes from being a promise to a platitude. We say we'll call and we don't. We're busy. Or so many of us phone it in. We're distracted. We're not really present. We go from seeing the opportunity to seeing the opportunity cost. And that shift changes us more than we realize. It impacts us more than we realize because over time, we don't just stop prioritizing friendship. We stop expecting it to nourish us. We lose touch with the creativity, with the support, the spontaneity, the presence, the meaning, the joy that friendships add to our lives. And maybe most importantly, we lose touch with the versions of ourselves that knew connection mattered and put that value into action. But I don't actually think that adulthood has to mean becoming less connected. I don't think growing up is supposed to mean emotionally outsourcing friendship to nostalgia. And I definitely don't think that it's too late to reconnect with friends we've lost, loved and lost, or with the parts of ourselves that crave new connection. Because friendship itself was never meant to be put on hold. And honestly, that's a huge part of why I created the show and why I've come full circle from two become one to two peas on a pod. There you go. That's the other innuendo. I want us to stop waiting and saying that we'll call each other later, to stop treating connection like it's something that we'll eventually and hopefully get around to. I want us all to practice reaching out, showing up, and investing in the connections and relationships that matter most. And that's why I'm so glad that you're here. Because you listening to this episode right now, that counts. You didn't wait. And maybe after today's conversation, you won't wait quite as long to take your next connection step, to send the text message, to make the call, or to remind someone, hey, you matter to me, and I'm thinking of you. Before we wrap up our very first office hours episode, I want to come back to the idea that we started with today, this friendship paradox, the reality that friendship is one of the most valuable relationships in our lives and one of the relationships it is easiest to undervalue, to overlook, to put off until later. So if there's one thing that I hope you take away from today's conversation, it's this: friendship isn't extra. It isn't optional. It's not a luxury, and it's definitely not a distraction. It was never meant to be something that we survive on autopilot either. Our friendships shape our well-being. They shape who we are, who we're becoming. And like any meaningful relationship, they need intention, they need attention, and they need our care. Connection doesn't happen later, and it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the small, everyday moments of reaching out, reaching toward each other now and again. Because those little thoughtful actions, they compound over time. And that brings me to this. At the end of every office hours episode, I'm going to leave you with one small but meaningful action you can take to strengthen your friendships and your overall sense of connection. Sometimes it'll actually be my guest who suggests one. Because yes, this show is about the stories and the science and the secrets of friendship, but it's also about the strategy. And I want our conversations and episodes of Two Peas on a Pod to actually move with you into your real life relationships. So here is your next connection step. Don't wait. Seriously. Send the text, make the call, reach out to somebody that you have been thinking about, that you're thinking about right now as you listen to this conversation, and tell them that they have crossed your mind. No perfectly crafted reason required, just because. And if you need an excuse, you have my full permission to use me as one. Tell them, hey, I just listened to this podcast episode about friendship and it reminded me of you. Because, friendly reminder, one of the most powerful things we can do in friendship is to let people know when they've had an impact on us, no matter how much time has passed. There's no expiration date on the value of letting someone know that you value them. And that, my friends, was our very first office hours. I am so glad that we got to share this time together, and I hope that it will inspire you to invest in your friendships and the people who matter most. I will be right back here with you next week for another episode of Two Peas on a Pod. And in the meantime, let's stay connected. Don't wait. Follow the show on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me at the Two Peas on a Pod and at Miriam Kirmayer across social channels. And of course, make sure that you share today's episode with a friend or maybe a fellow Spice Girl fan. And P.S., in case you are wondering, because there is always someone who asks, yes, I was usually posh. Until our next catch up, take care of yourself and the people in your pod. I will see you back here next week. Two Peas on a Pod is hosted by Dr. Miriam Kirmayer. Executive produced by Zoe Travis, Matthew Hoffman, Katya Kaminsky, and Dr. Miriam Kirmayer. Produced and edited by Podcast Nation. Producers Madison Britt and Alicia Paneer. Audio engineer Miles Carter. Original music by Sarah Walk. Created by Zoe Travis and Matthew Hoffman. Two Peas on a Pod is recorded in Montreal and Los Angeles. Today's program contains information that is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This program is not a substitute for psychological or medical advice. Please seek out your own support and research as needed. Take care, friends.